Bismillah, and welcome to this evening's edition of Bookbytes. In light of what we've been watching unfold in Palestine, we have a topic that is really a handbook on understanding and unpacking some of the more dire aspects of the Zionist occupation of Palestine. About 10 years ago, Suraya Dadu and Dr. Firoz Osman published Why Israel, which really got into the crux of the occupation. And what we're seeing today is we've come across Dr. Osman's latest publication, Shattering Zionist Myths, which really looks at about 100 myths, sort of unpacks them, demystifies them, but really allows us to get into the bare details of what this means, what the Haspara has accomplished, and how we can actually break this down into understanding how they've gotten away with it. I've got Dr. Osman online today from the Media Review Network. And quickly, I just want to talk about, one of the reviews that came up through the, read of the book. Decolonizing the land starts by decolonizing the mind. The Zionist occupation has long relied on a strategy of deception to distort the Palestinian narrative and manipulate information surrounding that. This book, Shattering Zionist Myths, refutes the Zionist propaganda machine and exposes the myths used to whitewash its heinous crimes and its controlling of the narrative, especially in the Western communities, by controlling the media and film industry, incorporating falsified facts in school curricula, smearing and labeling others with being anti-Semitic. The list is endless. And this is by Dr. Mahmoud Al-Zahar. Ramzi Baroud calls it an advocacy of demolishing Israeli Haspara, and Mr. Ronnie Castells calls it a way to debunk Zionist falsifications. This is really a conflict over colonized territory. So this evening we have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Firoz Osman on the show. Welcome to Bookbytes, and we'll have an opportunity now to really pick your brain on this very fascinating but important publication. Welcome to the show, Dr. Osman.
Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. So, you say in the book, the fundamental problem in Palestine is the Zionist concept of Jewish supremacy, with its core ambition being to create an exclusive Jewish state in the Muslim Middle East by displacing the indigenous inhabitants of Palestine. In essence, it is a conflict over colonized territory. Let's unpack the absolute need for this publication and how you came about to put it together through the journey of the last decade since Why Israel. Please chat to us something about your process.
Sure. I think what we started when we did Why Israel is it really began with some uncle asking me at a wedding, why does MRN focus so much on Israel? Is Israel such an issue? There are so many other people that are suffering in many other parts of the world. For example, in Rohingya, in Kashmir, in Mali, in Somalia, and so on. Why do you focus so much on Israel? And that was the beginning of Why Israel. And we found that in our research and our studies that Israel is the fundamental problem of conflict throughout the world, not only Palestine. And it is a tip of the Western American dagger that was planted into the heart of the Arab and the Muslim world that has caused chaos and atrocities and massacres that emanate from Israel itself. And we found that over the period when we studied Why Israel, when we wrote that and researched it, however, the problem was it was a research book. It was too much of an academic book. And the result is simply that many students whom Shattering Zionist Myths is aimed at, they didn't have the time to go and sit down with Why Israel, which is a tome of about 600 or 700 words. 600 or 700 pages. So during COVID and during the Israeli Apartheid Week, students needed something handy to refer to so that when they go onto campuses, and it was an important platform for the students to engage the Zionists, that they needed something quicker to read through, but yet argue some of the same arguments that has been raised by the Zionists over a long period of time. They kept on coming up in our engagements with them, bringing up issues such as, why is Al-Aqsa important for you? And if they get caught in the debate, they talk about, us being anti-Semitic, that Zionism is simply, a liberation movement. So we debunked all this in this book, choosing the most common 100 questions that come up. And it's not only questions, but some of the myths. So it's divided more or less half half, 50-50, in the sense that some of them is information and the other ones is a point by point refutation of the, as you mentioned, hasbara, the propaganda that has been brought up by them.
And as I was reading, I mean, I definitely see, the necessity and importance. I read Why Israel 10 years ago, important documentation of the material that was at hand, a nice, meaty volume at that. But then obviously a handbook that does equip all of us, not just the younger students, with the information we require to debunk those myths holding up Zionist ideology and the Hasbara attempts. Let's talk broadly, before we get into these myths, let's talk broadly about your work at the Media Review Network. When did it begin and what kind of advocacy are you involved in, especially with unpacking some of the whataboutery that we talk about, unpacking some of the whataboutery that comes about and various conflicts, both, locally and globally?
Sure. I think it was soon after our independence in 1994 that we found a few people tackling mainly Islamophobia in the media. And this is where we began to counter and use the space afforded to us after democracy came in. And we began to challenge the media of using only one-sided Western view of how they perceive Islam to be, of how they perceive the struggles of the oppressed throughout the world. And there was a link between the two of them. So when we started countering in the media some of the lies, outrageous lies that were done about Islam, for example, I know my own personal view was when they talked about female genital mutilation, talking about it, that it is Islamic and it is Quranic and so on, and there was no such thing. And we countered that in the media and corrected that. And after that, we began to meet a lot of journalists, editors in the newspapers, to give them another perspective, which they were surprised about. And if they refused to do that, we even used the media legal ways to insist that they publish a different or the correct perspective on it. However, in time, as the Media Review Network became known, we found that it was the Zionist lobbies in South Africa that counted us mostly when we tried to correct the facts on Palestine in particular. And that's when the entire focus changed into Palestine and the fact that Israel was almost echoing the same apartheid policies that we underwent here, and we exposed them at that time. It took a lot of work. It still takes a lot of work. The media, unfortunately, is not balanced. And I just wonder sometimes, how is it possible for one to be balanced in a situation which we see today, where there's such genocide being perpetrated throughout the world, and yet the media insists that there must be balance in the viewpoints. It boggles the mind, but that is our challenge.
Absolutely. And sometimes I wonder that in South Africa, we would be perfectly positioned to understand the rights of people anywhere in the world based on our history. So how do pockets of society exist that can condone such atrocities happening elsewhere in the world when we know from our own painful history what it caused, the kind of hurt it caused? It boggles the mind. I thought we would be perfectly positioned to set the example, whereas we see so much conflict on the ground here in South Africa when it comes to the issue of Palestine.
And not only South Africa, what is interesting is that the victims have now become the victimizers. I mean, the Jewish people who underwent such persecution in Germany have come all the way and are executing what is equivalent to what they themselves experience, and they're inflicting it onto the Palestinian people. But in South Africa itself, uh, you know, we have an excellent example in our international relations minister, Naledi Pandor, who has said very clearly, as have many who of the struggle stalwarts, that it is undoubtedly an apartheid entity, and we, I believe, must pressurize our government to take the lead to expel the Israeli ambassador, have nothing to do with them, pressurize them. Unfortunately, there are others that have overtaken us in this, particularly the South American countries. But, we are in the same situation here where the Palestinians are begging for help, as we were asking for help to fight the apartheid regime, close the embassies down. They are asking us to do the same, and I think we should oblige.
Let's talk about this idea of anti-Semitism, because it's been one of the most maybe pervasive excuses, myths being used by the Israeli state. Talk to us about breaking down that myth of anti-Semitism and this concept of how Zionism is held onto that so strongly.
This is, how do I put it? It is a stick to beat down any opposition to exposing what Israel is really doing. They come up with this argument to shut it down. And in Europe, it's an excellent example whereby they actually extort funds from Germany up to now from the United States of America, that if they argue for what they are doing, if they are committing, and they are committing heinous crimes against humanity, war crimes even now, nobody has the courage to tell them, stop, enough is enough, because then they will use this argument of you are being anti-Semitic. And they prick on the guilt complex, particularly of the Germans. And we can see it happening with the French, with the British, and the Germans in particular, joining the United States of America to say to the Israelis, you continue to do what you want to do. So the anti-Semitic card is played all the time. And if it is Jews and the Jewish people are demonstrating against what Israel is doing, they call it the self-hating Jews. We know in South Africa, we had Ronnie Kestrels, who has been ostracized quite strongly by the South African Zionist Federation, as well as the Jewish Board of Deputies. We know that Judge Richard Goldstone went to investigate the crimes that were committed by Israel. And he was ostracized from the Jewish community here. And he claims to believe that he is a Zionist. And yet not a word has to be uttered against the Israelis when they take out this anti-Semitic card and they browbeat you with it. So anti-Semitism is a card, I must admit, that it is beginning to lose its fearfulness of inflicting pain, and people are beginning to talk against Israel. I mean, look at the incredible demonstration, particularly in the West, in Europe, where 1 million people marched, despite the fact that Israel has said, you people are being anti-Semitic. Now we have seen at great pain to us what they are doing to the people in Gaza and Palestine as a whole.
I mean, we've seen, we acknowledge people of conscience who have spoken out from within those communities who seem to be instinctive about protecting either Zionism or the existence of Israel. And people have come out, as you said, in their numbers. Even Cape Town surprised us with, the huge following and show up in various parts of South Africa. Let's look at some of the myths that you debunk and the questions that arise from your book. We talked about the anti-Semitism question. You mentioned the concept of apartheid Israel, but let's look at a question like, does the presence of Palestinians in the Knesset, the right to vote, have political parties and our judges not dispel notions of apartheid? Has that come up? Yes, it has, because you've addressed it. But talk to us about some of that, um, political engagement and whether that's really access as such.
That is an argument that is constantly raised. When the debates took place on our campuses, they actually brought in experts in defending what Israel has been doing. They brought in Ethiopian Jews and women that have come in on our campuses to debate with our youngsters. And this is the argument they say, that it is not like South African apartheid because we have ministers, we have a judge in parliament, and they sort of sideline and sidewash all the apartheid laws that are there. The fact that there are certain roads that is only for Israelis. There are certain areas that are for Israelis only. They talk about any Jew from anywhere in the world that is able to come to Israel, and when they come to Israel, uh, uh, they get the privileges of a citizen. But yet there is a difference between what is a citizen and what is a nationality. So, for example, those Palestinians are citizens, so they have the right to vote in Israel. But if you're a nationalist and you have to carry what we used to call in our years a pass, and there they identify you either as a Jewish or a Druze or a Palestinian Muslim or a Palestinian Christian. And once you are identified on your book, on your passbook, then you are denied certain privileges. For example, entering college. For example, where do you have to stay and work? There are so many of the Palestinians that are deprived all these simply because they are Palestinian. They cannot live in certain areas. They got laws, for example, the admissions in certain so-called settlements or colonies where only Jews are allowed to come inside. So it is very clear and evident that there is apartheid. It's very clear and evident that there is a suppression of the Palestinian people. And however much they may try to say that they are judges or that they are allowed to vote, you are only allowed to vote if you or form a political party if you accept Israel as a democratic and Jewish state. Now, that alone will tell you that all Palestinians, Christian or Muslim, are second class citizens there. And it is very evident. So they don't have an argument on that score.
Let's talk about something of the current situation while discussing, some of the myths deep in the questions that are brought up in your book. I want you to hold up. Okay, I think they've put up a copy on the screen of your new book, Shattering Zionist Myths. And my question around, the the use of the excuse of unpacking or finding Hamas cells to bomb, for example, currently to bomb the hospital, the children's hospital, the Al-Shifa hospital, and spaces where civilians engage on a constant basis, and no evidence actually being found of the activity that they hope to accomplish, of any threat of any sort. Let's talk about that. I actually came across another book recently by UKZN Press that is just a small handbook, a beginner's guide on Hamas. But talk to us about some of those concerns.
Look, Israel has been exposed now and a long time ago that the hasbara that you mentioned, the propaganda that they propagate, and lies. And we see in the recent genocidal invasion of Gaza, where they talked right at the beginning that Hamas killed and beheaded 40 babies. And the American President Biden repeated this many times, that they have beheaded Palestinians and raped the women. But there was no such thing, and there was absolutely no evidence. Just today, they have found that at that rave party that they had right across the border from Gaza, that it was the Israeli Apache helicopters that killed their own people. And even some of the kibbutzim where Hamas fighters went into, when there was panic because they were begging for the Israeli army to come in and save them, they were shot at their homes, killed by heavy weaponry which Hamas fighters didn't have. So we see uh, currently what is going on is the exposure of their lies. What is evident is that this is another Nakba. We recall that it happened in 1948, where they butchered so many and slaughtered so many Palestinians, and they made a mistake, according to some of the Knesset members, that we didn't finish the job. This is the job where we now finishing the genocidal rage that is infuriated the Israelis because of what I say is a victory for Hamas in actually destroying the myth of invincibility that Israel had possessed. It has created a massive knock for not only the ego, the foundation of Israel is its military prowess, its power. And once you demolish that, the entire edifice of Israel as a nation state is going to collapse. And this is the victory that Hamas has already shown. So, in their fury, they now, and you have a guest coming on to into Salam Media in an hour or so at 9 o'clock. Please listen to him. Is Professor Samuel Aryan, whom I met recently. He is going to analyze what is the motive of what is going on with Israel. It is a second Nakba. It's going to wipe out the entire Gaza. And we, as an ummah, but as a people who love humanity, need to make sure that they fail in this ambition to remove the Palestinians from Gaza.
So, Dr. Osman, in the last month, we've seen nothing short of an extermination, an expulsion, an extermination, like I said, of the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza. Have the Arab nations betrayed Palestinians? I mean, you raise this in your book as well. Have the Arab nations, have the Arabs betrayed and abandoned and the people of Palestine?
And there's no question about it. I talk about normalization in the book, and it is an ongoing process. And this is another victory, apart from demolishing the myth of invincibility of Israel. This attack has brought to forth the importance of Masjidul Aqsa for the entire Ummah. That it was our first Qibla, it is our third most holiest shrine, and people seem to have forgotten what has been happening when the Zionists have gone in and desecrated Masjidul Aqsa. And it has remained silent, particularly the leadership of those people surrounding the Palestinians. We know in our own struggle, our frontline states in South Africa supported us in our struggle. They suffered as well when the apartheid regime attacked them for housing the freedom fighters. But we find that the Palestinians are suffering a fate. Look at Egypt. It is part and parcel of Israel in the blockade, where we find 2.3 million people are being starved. I mean, this is grotesque. And then we find the collaboration on the other side with the Jordanians. So the normalization of some of these states, particularly the Arab Emirates, that has developed a very close relationship with Israel, and the normalization process that was going on with the Saud family, the Saudi Arabians that has gone. It is really ironic and it is heartening that the poorest Arab state, Yemen, today has openly supported Palestine and taken over a ship from an Israeli ship and towed it away. So I think the people in general are supporting Palestine undoubtedly. But it is the rulers, the elite rulers, particularly of the Gulf states, that are so terrified of holding on to their thrones that if Hamas and Islamic Jihad have to succeed in bringing down Israel, their own thrones is in danger. And this is why they support Israel, because they need Israel's protection. And now they are shaking in their boots, because if Israel cannot defend its own people, if Israel cannot defend itself against against a group that was in a concentration camp, how did they manage to achieve this is remarkable and really calls for divine intervention. So yes, normalization is in trouble. They are now worried about their own people going to rebel against their own rule. And this has come about because of what Hamas and Islamic Jihad has done.
So their stance on self-preservation might actually turn against them in the long term.
I believe so. I think it's coming soon. Yes.
Let's look at this question and the myth of, one of the questions that the Zionist ideology has stood on is, does Israel have a right to defend itself? And further, what is it defending itself against?
Hmm. I think our international relations minister was excellent at this. That you go into somebody's home, you browbeat them, and or a rather crude way of saying it in another way is that you grab hold of this woman and you take her into the alleyway, rip her clothes off with the intentions of raping her, and then when she fights back, she uses her fingernails, she gouges out your eye, you accuse her, and you beat her up further, saying that you have the right to defend yourself. You cannot defend something that is not yours. You have stolen it. And Zionism in the last 2 minutes is the core problem. We cannot have a two-state solution, because uh, Zionism is an ideology that not only wants the entire Palestine, it wants part of Syria, it wants part of Jordan, it wants part of Saudi Arabia, and up the Sinai. And this is something we need to remember, that until and unless Zionism as an ideology is dismantled, there will never be peace in that area. And the Palestinians are in the forefront, in the vanguard of fighting against this. So Israel has no right to claim that it is defending itself. And international law sides with the Palestinians that any occupation, people under an occupation has the right to defend themselves. They are the ones that are defending themselves. What are the Israelis defending themselves from? The right for them to perpetuate such misery, such genocide. Are they defending themselves to say that international law allows them to commit genocide against innocent people? They have absolutely no right. And Zionism is faltering at the moment, and we have hope, inshallah, that they will be victorious. That is
Dr.
the humble.
Osman, we've just sort of got a taste of what your new publication has developed, has debunked and put out there. But I'm really grateful for the time we had to chat with you this evening, and I do hope that everyone's going to pick up copies of Shattering Zionist Myths to really arm and equip and inform ourselves, so that when we stand out there, we know that we can debunk these whatabouteries and we can speak up on the sort of political battlefield that we find ourselves in, even locally. Jazakallah khair for your time, and we wish you everything of the best with the ongoing struggle and the advocacy work that you guys do at MRN. We thank you again.
Shukran.
Alhamdulillah
Thank
for
you
that.
so much. Let me just say that these are all 1 or 2 or 3 pages, so people don't have to be afraid of picking up this book. It will really inform you quite quickly. Within 5 minutes, you'll know each chapter. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Shukran. Salaam alaikum.
You're welcome. Wa alaikum salam. And there you have it. We spoke to Dr. Firoz Osman of the Media Review Network, themselves doing amazing advocacy work about his new publication, Shattering Zionist Myths. Please do get yourself a copy. And with that, that's it from this weekend's edition of Book Bites. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.